avert, my error remains with me. If indeed you exalt yourselves against me and plead my disgrace against me, know then that God has wronged me and has surrounded me with his net. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, thank you so much for your loving kindness and this new day that you've given us. This opportunity also that we have to come together and to look into your word, that we might strengthen ourselves, strengthen our faith, and be better servants of yours. As we go through the book of Job this morning, help us to put aside the cares of the world. Be with all the classes and all the teachers today, that your name might be honored through Christ. Amen. So if you had to summarize what you've seen from Job's speeches and his friends' speeches, what's the summary of Job's speeches so far? Okay, I saw Jack first. Okay, and he said that several times now, that you're not the kind of friends that we need. He said back in chapter 16, miserable comforters are you all. But he said this, he's given this message several times throughout the exchange of speeches. Tristan, did you have something else to add to that?
To me, it was Job's part was good and bad happen to all. I mean, we can't really base what's my state is based off of what's going on in my life. And then the friends are just saying that you got bad things happening to you because you're not in a good state with God.
Over and over again. And so Job is at least trying to present logical arguments to that, things that they should have been able to call to mind from their own experiences, and yet they're not doing so. And I've come back to this several times. Maybe it's because the things that are happening to Job are so bad that they feel like there's just no other explanation for it. This is not like having a day of bad luck, or not feeling well and being sick for a while. This is one thing after another that has happened. And so their conclusion there is, this has got to be an indication that you're not right with God. One of the questions I asked in the last lesson was, can we use the events? Does God talk to us through the events in our lives? Okay. All right. So we've got to be very careful about that. We cannot go through our life and say, okay, this is what's happening, so that's what God's telling me this. Dangerous practice. That's exactly what Job's friends are doing here. Very dangerous practice. All right, so let's take that a step farther then. So when New Orleans gets hit by a flood due to Hurricane Katrina, what's our conclusion? Because I'm going to tell you, brethren, sometimes decide that God is doing something that maybe He is, but we don't know that. Or when there's fires in Pacific Palisades in the Los Angeles area, and we decide that Hollywood's just gotten too far off track, and God is correcting them now, or bringing them, well, again, we need to be careful about things like that. I'm not saying it's not happening. God certainly can use events in our lives to help us get our minds on track, to help us get our priorities in order. We even see Elihu saying that later on when he speaks, that God can use different things to help us get back on track. But what's our guideline then? Not what happens in our lives, but what God has told us, and how He's revealed that in His Word. And so that's what Job has to keep remembering here. That's what his friends should know at this point. All right, so we get into chapter 19. His friends have continued on. They're not listening to the logical arguments of Job, that sometimes bad things happen to good people. And it seems Job is just getting more and more frustrated. How long will you torment my soul and break me in pieces with these words? All right, so you've reproached me these 10 times. You're not ashamed that you have wronged me. And if I have erred, all right, my error remains with me. You haven't corrected me. You haven't shown me anything really that I've done wrong. Remember in chapter 13, he says, name my sin. And his friends, they're just generally talking here, very generically saying, you must have sinned. You need to get your life back on track. And he's like, well, that's not a good application because that's not why these things are happening. I know the course of my life. And while I'm not claiming perfection in a sinless sense, I am saying that my life has been characterized by righteousness, not by the wickedness that you're accusing me of. All right, so know then that God has wronged me, verse 6, and has surrounded me with his net. If I cry out concerning wrong, I am not heard. If I cry out, there is no justice. He has fenced up my way so that I cannot pass. And he has set darkness in my paths. He has stripped me of my glory and taken the crown from my head. He breaks me down on every side, and I am gone. My hope he has uprooted like a tree. He has also kindled his wrath against me, and he counts me as one of his enemies. His troops come together and build up their road against me. They encamp all around my tent. He has removed my brothers far from me, and my acquaintances are completely estranged from me. My relatives have failed, and my close friends have forgotten me. Those who dwell in my house and my maidservants count me as a stranger. I am an alien in their sight. I call my servant, but he gives no answer. I beg him with my mouth. My breath is offensive to my wife, and I am repulsive to the children of my own body. Even young children despise me. I arise, and they speak against me. All my close friends abhor me, and those whom I love have turned against me. My bone clings to my skin and to my flesh, and I have escaped by the skin of my teeth. All right, so he says a lot of things here. He talks about his family and how they've rejected him. He's lost a lot of his family. Let's not forget that. But he's probably talking either in general terms here of more distant relatives, or maybe there's grandchildren, or whatever. Those who would be in his family, but they're not. They weren't killed, like we saw in the beginning of the book. But they're, or it could be just generically young children. They think I'm awful looking. So it may be more poetic in language. In either case, let's go back to verse 6. What does he say has happened to him in verse 6?
God has wronged him.
God has wronged me. Now, earlier, you remember that he has stated, God has done this, and maybe there's some discussion that we've had, and both in the class and on the side, about did Job cross the line when he said, God has done this? All right, maybe or maybe not. I could see arguments both ways, but he has certainly complained about the fairness of it all. And here, when you get to chapter 19 and verse 6 and the following verses, he's actually saying he's done a wrong act here against me, that I didn't deserve this, and yet I've gotten this. All right, so what do we think here? Jack?
18 what's being done to him in his life. And he's saying, well, I'm righteous and God's supposed to only punish the sinners. So now God's wrong, right? And the ESV, I like the way they worded, know then that God has put me in the wrong. So it's this idea of like, God's taken me and I was great and perfect. I'm great and righteous and blameless, right? And he's made me now a sinner. He's made me wrong. And that's what's really going on here, right? Is he's decided to step in and take the place of God as judgment.
And so let's file this away for a few chapters, because what's going to happen later on is Elihu approaches Job with regard to self-righteousness, and God also approaches Job with regard to self-righteousness. And basically God's accusation is, would you annul my judgment? His whole argument to Job is, what are you doing here? you're thinking you must be righteous, so I must be the one that doesn't know how to operate things, how things ought to be. Well, that's stepping over the line, clearly. Okay, anything else on these verses, though? So God has wronged me. What else does he say that God doesn't do or does to him? Look at verse 7. If I cry out concerning wrong, I am not heard. If I cry out or cry aloud, there is no justice. God's not listening to my complaints. So I'm being wronged, and he's not even listening to my side. Okay, verse 8, God, he basically 8 and following, he's just saying, using a lot of different language to say God's against me. There's a lot of figures that state this thought here. He's stricken me. He breaks me down on every side. My hope's uprooted like a tree. He's kindled his wrath against me. His troops come together and build up their road against me. They encamp all around my tent. God has taken a position against me, and this isn't right, is the message that Job is proclaiming here. Yeah, Jack.
I think verse 11 especially, where he says, counts me as his adversary, there's such an irony to this, that Job is taking the stance that because of all this, God is set against me. And what we know as the reader is the reason this is happening is because God said, look at this great man who's on my side, right? Like, this is my, paragon of virtue, right, that you should look to for faith and righteousness. And so, again, we see how Job's kind of departing from, and in his efforts to ascribe meaning to God and the actions in his life, he's from a totally wrong conclusion.
That's right. God has done quite the opposite. That got this thing kicked off. That God has told Satan that Job is righteous, and that's what got this whole ball rolling. Anyway, yes.
The important thing to note is that Job is not saying that he is not with God. He is just saying that God is not with him. So.
Yeah, he wants to be with God, and clearly, and we're going to see in his following speeches that, again, he gets demanding. He wants to challenge God to deal with this matter and not just sit back and do nothing. Okay, as we get on through the rest of this chapter, when we look at 13 through 20, how is Job viewed here? If you had to just summarize how he feels now, his place is amongst others.
Well, I think verse 25 to me, he said, I know my Redeemer liveth.
Okay, so he still has some hope in his God, and that at some point things are going to change. So that's important to remember throughout this. Job is not falling away completely. He overstates his case and says some things, probably through the provocation of his friends, that he probably would not have said otherwise. How does he feel like he is viewed by everybody around him? Ken?
Like he's a stranger, alien in their sight.
Yeah, he's repulsive to everybody. Nobody wants to be around him. Nobody wants anything to do with him. Maybe because of the things his friends are saying, but maybe it's just everybody else has concluded the same thing, or just look at the guy. He's just a pulp of sores, and he's a mess. And so he's probably difficult to look at. And he's just not, he's the kind of guy you see out of the corner of your eye, and you don't want to spend too much time with him physically because it's just hard. What about verse 20? My bones cling to my skin and to my flesh, and I have escaped. How closely has he escaped? By the skin of my teeth. And so I'm only alive by this much. It's just... Okay, somebody want to read 21 through 29? Tristan looked up, so he looks like he volunteers.
Have pity on me, oh you my friends, for the hand of God has struck me. Why do you persecute me as God does, and are not satisfied with my flesh? Oh, that my words were written. Oh, that they were inscribed in a book, that they were engraved on a rock with an iron pen and lead forever. For I know that my Redeemer lives, and he shall stand at last on the earth. And after my skin is destroyed, this I know, that in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see for myself, and my eyes shall behold, and not another. How my heart yearns within me. You should say, how shall we persecute him, since the root of the matter is found in me? Be afraid of the sword for yourselves, for wrath brings the punishment of the sword, that you may know there is a judgment.
So God is persecuting him, is how Job feels about the matter, and his friends are doing the same thing. And yet, in all of that, God knows that, that Job knows that God is the one who is his best witness regarding his lifestyle and his righteousness. He's grasping for that. He's grappling with it, wrestling with it, because he doesn't understand all the things going on, but he still maintains this hope of the relationship with God in the long run. And so that's kind of what he's clinging to, that at some point God's going to deliver me from this, maybe in this life, but sometimes you get the idea that his deliverance is when I die, this will all be over with. So maybe God will deliver him in death. That's certainly what he's asked for, at least on a couple of occasions throughout here, that God, why don't you just put me out of my misery? All right, so we get through chapter 19 and into chapter 20, and Zophar decides it's time for him to speak up again. All right, so somebody want to read 1 through 11 of chapter 20? Okay, Adam?
And Zophar the Naamathite answered and said, Therefore my thoughts answer me, because of my haste within me. I hear censure that insults me, and out of my understanding a spirit envy. Do you not know this from of old, since man was placed on earth, that the exalting of the wicked is short, and the joy of the godless but for a moment? Though his height mount up to the heavens, and his head reach to the clouds, he will perish forever like his own dung. Those who have seen him will say, Where is he? He will fly away like a dream and not be found. He will be chased away like a vision of the The eye that saw him will see him no more, nor will his place any more behold him. His children will seek the favor of the poor, and his hands will give back his wealth. His bones are full of youthful vigor, but it will lie down with him in the dust.
I'll tell you what, somebody else want to pick up from there and go 12 through 19? Dennis, did you have that one? I'm sorry.
12 through 19.
You volunteered a minute ago, and then...
Though evil is sweet in his mouth, though he hides it under his tongue, though he is loath to let it go and holds it in his mouth, yet his food is turned in his stomach. It is the venom of cobras within him. He swallows down riches and vomits them up again. God casts them out of his belly. He will suck the poison of cobras. The tongue of a viper will kill him. He will not look upon the rivers, the streams flowing with honey and curds. He will give back the fruit of his toil and will not swallow it down. From the profit of his trading, he will get no enjoyment, for he has crushed and abandoned the poor. He has seized a house that he did not build.
Okay, so we're not done with his speech yet, but what would you say summarizes Zophar's thoughts here so far?
There is a reckoning.
Okay, there's going to be a reckoning for who? Anybody who's wicked. If you're wicked, there's going to be a reckoning. Now, what makes me wonder here, is he at least hearing some of Job's arguments? Because what does he say in verse 5, for example?
The wicked is short.
Okay.
If you were, the evil, I think there's this kind of tone deaf, I mean, it's all pretty tone deaf, but there's this tone deaf moment of like, those who are sinning, they're going to have just a little bit of joy before they're punished. And I don't think they've seen anyone ever show that picture.
Now, their speeches so far have pretty much said God's going to destroy the wicked, and so that proves that you are wicked because you've been destroyed. Now, and Job's been saying all along, that's not always the case. Bad things happen to good people. Right now, it's just my time. He said that, sometimes things are not fair. Sometimes the tents of robbers do prosper. And so, I don't know, maybe Zophar has at least listened to the argument now, and he's saying, oh, that may be so, Job, okay? That may be so that sometimes the wicked do have little bits of time when they're prospering, but it's short-lived. And so he's back to the same old application after that it's short-lived, and so your time of prospering is over. It's short-lived because you are wicked. I mean, he gets back to that overall crux of what the same thing that he's been saying. When you get down to verse 19, what's he say in verse 19?
Second the poor.
Yeah, what has the wicked done? He's forsaken the poor and has violently seized a house which he did not build. All right, now I have to wonder here, and by the time you get to Eliphaz in chapter 22, it seems pretty apparent that they are trying to come up with the exact things Job has done. But I got to wonder if Zophar is the one who's broached this subject, where he's saying, okay, Job, you've called out to God back in chapter 13, we see that, to name my sin. And we've been talking too generically, apparently, for you, Job, that you're just not listening. So here's what wicked people have done. Now, he doesn't say you have done it, but he's saying this is what wicked people have done, with the implication, of course, that since Job, you're wicked, you must have done things like this too. Eliphaz doesn't hold back any words. He just comes out and says it in chapter 22, but we'll get there in a minute. He has oppressed and forsaken the poor. Okay, so when you want to talk about somebody who's done bad things, when you tromp on those who are helpless and poor, that seems like a pretty bad thing, right? Everybody pretty much agrees with that. You don't take advantage of the poor and just tromp on them and violently seize a house which you did not build. You're basically stealing from them. All right, let's look at verses 20 through 29 now. Somebody want to read that? Okay, yeah, please.
Yeah, please.
Because he knows no quietness in his heart, he will not save anything he desires. Nothing is left for him to eat. Therefore, his well-being will not last. In his self-sufficiency, he will be in distress. Every hand of misery will come against him. When he is about to fill his stomach, God will cast on him the fury of his wrath, and it will rain it on him while he is eating. He will flee from the iron weapon. A bronze bow will pierce him through. It is drawn and comes out of the body. Yes, the glittering point comes out of his gall. Terrors come upon him. Total darkness is reserved for his treasures. An unfanned fire will consume him. It shall go ill with him who is left in his tent. The heavens will reveal his iniquity, and the earth will rise up against him. The increase of his house will depart, and his goods will flow away in the day of his wrath. This is the portion from God for a wicked man, the heritage appointed to him by God.
So, Job, I understand bad things sometimes happen to good people, and good things happen to bad people. But this has been going on for a while now. And surely, if you were righteous, God would have taken away all of the bad things that have occurred to you. It would change the direction of your life and heal you. And so here's what's appointed for the wicked. And so the summation of what Chris just read then is, how bad is it going to be for the wicked? Any hope at all? Not if they remain in their wickedness, right? It's going to be complete. And he uses a lot of poetic language here to describe it in different ways, all the things that are going on to the wicked, and then by association, this must be what's happening to Job as well, is the idea. And so the heavens are going to reveal your iniquity. He believes that's what's happening to Job now. The earth is going to rise up against him. So, Job, you say that all these, you're repulsive to everybody. Well, here's why. You're wicked. So, no wonder you're repulsive to everybody. The increase of his house will depart. Oh, guess what, Job? Check. That's happened. His goods will flow away in the day of his wrath. God's done that to you too, Job. This is the portion from God for a wicked man, the heritage appointed to him by God. Okay, so I asked the question, and we've asked it several times. We'll continue to ask it. Is there truth to this speech?
Truth to most all their speeches, there's truth to them.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
And in a particular context, you could read this and go, wow, this is pretty good wisdom. Yeah, Adam.
Well, his argument is that, yes, good people suffer, but the evil suffer completely. And you have suffered completely. So and so, to your question, we know that in the end, the evil will suffer completely. So, yes, I would say it's true. Misapplied, but true.
So when the psalmist says, I was young and now I'm old, and what had he never seen? God's never forsaken his people and never seen the righteous begging bread. All right, and so that's what Job's friends would say. Okay, see that? Now, they came before that time, but nevertheless, that's the kind of argument they would make. That doesn't mean the psalmist argument is a bad argument, because in the big scheme of things, that's exactly what God does and will do. But it's not according to the time frame that we think of it as humans sometimes, especially not according to the time frame that Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar were thinking, and even Job too, as it turns out. And so, yes, at some point, God's not, good, it's going to triumph over evil, but we don't know exactly when that's going to be, and so we can't take a situation in life and make an exact application of that. That goes back to the question that I asked a while ago. Can we know what God is telling us through the events of our lives? We better be very careful trying to do that. Now, can we be reminded of what's important by the events in our lives? Absolutely. Can God take an event like a storm or something like that to help us get back on track? Absolutely. But our guidance from God is based on His Word that He's given to us. All right, now we get to chapter 21, and Job is going to speak again. And so here Job says, then Job answered and said, verse 1, listen carefully to my speech, and let this be your consolation. Bear with me that I may speak, and after I have spoken, keep mocking. All right, so there's a lot of tension that's still going on here. Give me a chance to speak, and then you can keep on your mocking, but be quiet for a few minutes if you would. As for me, is my complaint against man? And if it were, why should I not be impatient? All right, so here's a clue. Now, my complaint at this point is against the fairness of what God has done to me. It's not against man, although if I wanted to complain against man, there's certainly, why not? Why shouldn't I be impatient with you? Look at me and be astonished. Put your hand over your mouth. Even when I remember, I am terrified, and trembling takes hold of my flesh. I'm in a bad state here, and you're not helping me, is kind of the implication here, it seems to me. Even when I remember, why do the wicked live and become old? Yes, become mighty in power. Okay, so Zophar has just said, okay, yeah, sometimes the wicked do prosper, but it's for a very short duration. And Job here is countering that, saying, no, sometimes the wicked, they get old, and they still are in power. Their descendants, verse 8, are established with them in their sight, and their offspring before their eyes. Their houses are safe from fear, neither is the rod of God upon them. Their bull breeds without failure, their cow calves without miscarriage. They send forth their little ones like a flock, and their children dance. Okay, so good things happen to bad people, and it's not just for brief periods of time, it can be for their entire lives. They sing to the tambourine and harp, rejoice to the sound of the flute. They spend their days in wealth, and in a moment go down to the grave. Yet they say to God, "Depart from us, for we do not desire the knowledge of your ways. Who is the Almighty that we should serve him? And what profit do we have if we pray to him? Indeed, their prosperity is not in their hand. The counsel of the wicked is far from me." So it seems to me that he is rebutting Zophar's most recent argument here that, well, even when the wicked do prosper, it's only for a very short time. That's not the case either, guys. If you'll just look to your lives and your experiences, you should know this. All right, somebody want to read verses? Oh, let's see. 17 through 21. Kristen.
How often is the lamp of the wicked put out? How often does their destruction come upon them in the sorrows God distributes in his anger? They're like straw before the wind, and like chaff that a storm carries away. They say, God lays up one iniquity for his children. Let him recompense him, that he may know. Let his eyes see his destruction, and let him drink of the wrath of the Almighty. For what does he care about his household after him, when the number of his months is cut in half?
All right, so the same idea here in these few verses, that the wicked, they go on and on and on sometimes, and they don't even ever see until they die. In their lifetime, they don't ever see any bad things, any punishment from God, even when they flaunt God and say, what is God? We don't want him in our lives. And so, and in fact, to the degree they say, oh, let him, attack our children and take out his wrath on them. It doesn't matter to me. I'll be dead anyway. I mean, that's kind of the idea, isn't it? All right, somebody want to pick up verses 22 through 20. How about 22 through 34? Let's just finish the chapter, because I would like to get through 22 today. Yes, Dennis, if you would.
Sorry. Will any teach God knowledge, seeing that he judges those who are on high? One dies in his full vigor, being wholly at ease and secure, his pails full of milk, and the marrow of his bones moist. Another dies in bitterness of soul, never having tasted of prosperity. They lie down alike in the dust, and the worms cover them. Behold, I know your thoughts and your schemes to wrong me. For you say, where is the house of the prince? Where is the tent in which the wicked lived? Have you not asked those who travel the roads? And do you not accept their testimony that the evil man is spared in the day of calamity, that he is rescued in the day of wrath? Who declares his way to his face, and who repays him for what he has done? When he is carried to the grave, watch is kept over his tomb. The clods of the valley are sweet to him. All mankind follows after him, and those who go before him are innumerable. How then will you comfort me with empty nothings? There's nothing left of your answers but falsehood.
So even though you've changed your tone so far, and now you're admitting, okay, sometimes bad things do happen to good people, and good things happen to bad people, you're still wrong because you think it's short-lived, and so you're making that application wrongly to my case. And who can change what God's appointments are? And of course, nobody can, and they all know that. So he really is hammering home this idea here that the bad, sometimes they just aren't punished in our lifetime. We do not see that happening. And so no matter what you're saying, no matter how many times you say it or how forcefully you say it, it's still not true. And so you can't comfort me, is how he closes out this chapter, with these continued statements that's just really a rehash of the same old thing that you've been trying to drive home to me all along. It's just not the case. All right, we get to chapter, and I've asked a couple of questions here. Is Job, in this speech, is Job disputing the points emphasized by his friends, or is he accusing God of being unfair? And in my mind, he's already accused God of being unfair to some degree, but here his main point of emphasis is to argue against the speech made by Zophar, that things aren't what you were describing them to be, and all you need to do is open your eyes and look at life to tell that. All right, so considering his agony and the harassment by his friends, how might Job's dispute of the friends' points have led to accusations against God's fairness? And is that what's happening? That seems to me to be the case, because he starts arguing about that God must be doing something wrong. It's just not fair. And I need answers, and I'm demanding answers. He's about to demand answers maybe even more forcefully soon. Yes, Dennis. In this case, yes. Yeah. I mean, God is, and he acknowledges throughout, God's righteous. We can't kick against God's ways. But in this case, he's messed up this time. He's just not seeing it the way that he ought to. Yeah, Jack. Yeah, they've dug into that premise pretty good here, haven't they? And, oh, yeah, what's Galatians 6:1 and 2 say? Okay. And so when somebody in the early part of Galatians there, Paul tells them, if anybody's overtaken in a trespass, then what is somebody who's spiritually minded going to do? Restore him in a spirit of gentleness. So bear one another's burdens. Restore one another in a spirit of gentleness. What are you thinking as you're restoring somebody in a spirit of gentleness? Okay. Lest you be tempted also is the language. And so, yes, there's a time to deal with sin, and sometimes it has to be a harsh dealing with sin, as Paul told the Corinthians with the man who had that relationship with his father's wife, that no, not to eat with such a one who's engaged in that kind of activity and other types of activities that are highly sinful, and they're not willing to change. But when we try to correct somebody, if we understand that, but for the grace of God, I could have been in this situation too, or some other, or maybe my weakness isn't this, maybe it's somewhere else. So how would that have helped Job if his friends had come to him in that sense?
Give him comfort.
Think that might have made a difference? Maybe Job wouldn't have said some of the things that he said had they approached him in this sense. But they've decided that they know everything that's going on, and that they're right and that he's wrong, and there's no other explanation that's going to fit. Now Eliphaz gets to speak. All right, so what does Eliphaz say? Eliphaz seems to be maybe the oldest of the friends. I mean, you get that idea since he was the first to speak, and he seems to be the most harsh in some ways in his speeches. But whatever the case, Eliphaz the Temanite answered and said in chapter 22 and verse 1, can a man be profitable to God? Though he who is wise may be profitable to himself. Is it any pleasure to the Almighty that you are righteous? Or is it gain to him that you make your ways blameless? Is it because of your fear of him that he corrects you and enters into judgment with you? There's the theme of this speech here. Is it because of your great righteousness that this is happening to you? Okay, there's sarcasm there. Does Eliphaz seem like he's losing patience? It does to me. I mean, he's getting sarcastic. Of course, that's been flying all along, some sarcasm in both directions. Is it because of your fear of him that he reproves you? Is it because you're so righteous? Is that why you're punished right now? Come on, Job. Is not your wickedness great and your iniquity without end? Okay, so in the following verses, what has Job done according to Eliphaz? So far has hinted at it, that this is the unrighteous, the wicked, they've done these kind of things, oppressing the poor and so forth. Eliphaz decides, okay, you're not listening. It's time to start naming sins. What does he say Job has done?
He's oppressed the poor. He's sent widows away empty. He's exacted pledges of his brothers. I mean, it's horrific. It's really bad.
And you know, it gets so bad here. You've done this, you've done this, you've done this. What are some of the worst things our society can believe that somebody would do? When you trample on widows and orphans, and that's right there in the list. You've oppressed widows and orphans, okay? Everybody's against that. Now, is there any proof of this that's been spoken? Of course not. Had Job done these things? No evidence at all of that. In fact, the evidence really just underlines the fact that he had not engaged in this kind of lifestyle. All right, you've crushed the strength of orphans. You've sent widows away empty. You've stripped the naked of their clothing, while nobles you have left alone. You've taken pledges from your brother with no reason. Therefore, snares, verse 10, are all around you, and sudden fear troubles you, or darkness so that you cannot see, and an abundance of water covers you. That's why these things are happening, because you have done this sin, this sin, this sin, and this sin. Remember, Job had asked, name my sin, and Eliphaz says, okay, Job, since you're not listening, I'm going to name your sins. But he's making things up. Is not God in the height of heaven, and see the highest stars, how lofty they are? And you say, what does God know? Can he judge through the deep darkness? Now, Job did not say this word for word, let's be clear. Some of his sentiments did kind of lead in that direction, because he has just suggested that God's not doing things right. God is being unfair to me. He has wronged me. And so there's a sense in which Job has said some of these kinds of things, but Eliphaz, as we see he does, takes it to the next level. All right, let's try to finish here. What should he do according to the rest of the chapter when you keep reading? Verse 21 in particular.
Agree with God, like just accept it and try to make up for what you've done. Go to him for forgiveness.
Yeah, my New King James Version, acquaint yourself with him and be at peace. Thereby good will come to you. Receive instruction from his mouth. Lay up his words in your heart. So the idea, if you turn back to the Almighty, this can be gone in a snap. Just give in, Job, and do what's right. And at the bottom there, he says, at the end there, he says, when they cast you down and you say exaltation will come, and so when everybody thinks you're repulsive and you're sitting there saying, oh, things are going to get better, exaltation will come, God will save that humble person if you'll just humble yourself, Job, and he will even deliver one who is not innocent. So if you'll humble yourself, even though you have indeed sinned, God will deliver you. Okay, any comments? We're out of time today.
Just one.
Yes.
Matthew chapter 7, where it talks about judging. I think that's it would have been helpful for them to judge Job more rightly, because of the measure that they used will be measured back at them. is concerning. It's something that I try to be careful about myself when I'm judging someone. I need to be careful about how it can be judged back.
Absolutely, and that ties in with Galatians 6 there. You know, they seem to have a beam in their eyes when they were trying to help Job get rid of this speck. Anything else? When somebody falsely accuses you of something, how do you react? That sets the stage for chapter 23. So let's think about that for next week. Thank you.